Hello and welcome to another episode of the Please Bet on Football Games off-season edition podcast. I am your host, Alex, here with the on-air talent, Joe. Joe, how you doing this week?
I just got back from Vegas 2 nights ago, which means we are officially entered in the Circa Millions contest again.
Hell yeah.
We took 2023 off. We shouldn't have. We would have made a lot of fucking money, and I just blew our YouTube algorithm a minute into the podcast. But we're back. PBFG Pod is in the contest. Let's make some money.
Absolutely. I'm excited. It was not quite as fun last year betting, knowing that we couldn't potentially win a shitload of money.
Yeah, I think this year it's $3.5 million to the winner, and I don't expect to necessarily win. But if we end up in first place for even a quarter of the season, we end up profiting like a couple dozen grand.
I would love that.
Which we will be splitting 50-50.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, which would be good.
Yeah, I like that. Anyway, let's talk about some actual football. This week, we have the AFC North.
Your old stomping grounds.
Yeah, admittedly, not as knowledgeable as I used to be, as I've dipped my toes into other divisions. But yeah, I still know most of these guys. I feel confident.
Well, we're gonna test you right off the bat with the first team.
And just a reminder, we are going in reverse order of projected win totals. So first up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers with a projected win total of 8.5 wins.
I love that even Vegas is literally just like, I don't know. This team doesn't make sense, but Mike Tomlin's going to have them at or around 500 to see if they can get to a winning record. Get it started real simply. I don't think they will. This team is...
the roster doesn't look good, but granted, the roster hasn't looked particularly good for like 5 years.
Well, it may have gotten worse than ever. The algorithm currently has them at 28, so like we're looking at a top 5 pick here. My manual rankings has them at 21, and that's largely just because I believe that there is a little something, not much, but a tiny bit of something to the Mike Tomlin voodoo. Overall, though, I've got the roster pulled up on our second screen here. There's not a lot to be not sad about. Typically, what the Steelers have been able to hang their hat on is they just can't stop drafting studs at wide receiver. But it seems that they did stop drafting studs at wide receiver because their starting 3 looks like it's going to be some combination of George Pickens, bona fide stud, absolutely. Roman Wilson, who I kind of like, but he's a rookie 3rd-round pick, and he was in a low-volume offense at Michigan, so it's not like he's super polished. And then Van Jefferson, the epitome of mid. The middest of mid. And then at tight end, Pat Freiermuth, who is solid. But your depth is like Quez Watkins. He doesn't know how to play football. Scotty Miller, he can't try to make a catch without jumping. Calvin Austin, never put it together. So this is like a B receiving core. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I might even put it more like B minus.
The only saving grace is just George Pickens is dope.
He is great, and he is insane, and I think that does play in a little bit.
He's both insane in what he is capable of doing and his actual temperament.
Exactly. But it's tough when you only have one guy. Like, yeah, the other guys aren't bad, but they're not good at all.
Like, I think Roman Wilson can be something, but he's an upside projection who's going to be your starting slot. And he's not really, he shouldn't be a slot. He's more of an off-ball outside receiver or off-line, whatever. He's not a linebacker, but he shouldn't be your X. And he's not. You got George Pickens, but him and Wilson and Van Jefferson, just neither of them are slots. I don't know how they're going to make it work. Here's the fun part. It probably won't matter because we're going to see an absolute ton of Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, which is an extremely mediocre backfield. I like Jaylen Warren, but just by simple function of he won't get that many touches, I can't love him. Like, I think Warren's like a B+ running back and Najee's like a B to B- running back. We're looking at another B.
Hey, but they got Cordero.
Yeah, 34-year-old converted wide receivers aren't usually bell cow backs.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a ton of talent in the skill positions. Like, again, it's not a bunch of really bad players, but it's nothing that's really going to help your team outside of George Pickens. I mean, I like Freiermuth, but He's
I
not a
like,
game changer.
yeah, I like Freiermuth for what he is, but you don't game plan for Pat Freiermuth with good reason.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's a little bit above average simply because George Pickens drags the rest of that group above average.
And we turn to their offensive line, which I have to admit, they've done a masterful job of rebuilding. 2 years ago, we were looking at like Chuck Sikorafor and other guys whose names I don't remember and can't pronounce. And now we're looking at Broderick Jones, monster, if only because it takes 3 seconds to walk around him. We got Isaac Seumalo coming over from Philly. Apparently he loves Pennsylvania. Zach Frazier, rookie second-round pick as your center. I'm not going to pretend I studied him that much in the draft. We'll find out if he's any good. I'm sure he's okay. They drafted him in the second round. James Daniels is a good guard. And then finally, Troy Fautanu, I thought was more of a guard. I didn't love his game, but it was fine. So overall, again, it's like a B to B plus line. Like it's pretty good. In fact, it could be B plus to A minus depending on how the two rookies who are going to start pan out. But it's certainly not like the kind of game-breaking offensive line that Detroit or Philly has boasted, which can turn an average, surrounding offensive group into something much better.
Yeah, this line isn't incredible. And whenever you have two rookies starting on a line, yes, they were first and second round picks, so you expect them to be a little bit better out of the gate. But still, it's two rookies on an O-line. That's tough. So I think they might struggle to start and then be pretty good towards the end of the year. But it's at least a solid offensive line.
Yeah, at the very least, it'll be decent.
Yeah, it's not going to wreck games for them. But again, it's kind of similar to the skill position where it's like, it's solid. It's not great.
I think it's definitely the best part of their offense. And we'll get to the last piece in a moment.
I have to say, that's more of an indictment of the skill on this offense. But yeah, let's talk about QB. Some additions.
So they're just betting on people that Twitter was dead wrong about 2 years ago. They're betting on quarterbacks that at @Joe_A_NFL said, these are bad quarterbacks. And all of Twitter said, LOL, you're dumb. That's your without
ratio.
Ratio plus Peter Griffin racism meme.
You do get that one a lot.
Well, we can thank Steven Ruiz for this one. It is, if you're going to call someone racist, it's the funniest way to do it. It is funny.
It is.
I'll give it to him. Regardless, turns out I was right again. Russell Wilson is a bottom 5 starter in the NFL, and Justin Fields, I don't recall the last time a quarterback squandered as much physical talent as he has. I think Jamarcus Russell is getting a run for his money. Jamarcus
is so sad because Justin Fields he's not drinking lean. By all accounts, he's a good guy that works hard.
Exactly. That's the sad thing. Jamarcus Russell was fat, 290 pounds, chugging lean, similar results. That's an exaggeration. Fields is better than that. And in fact, I believe that Fields will win the starting job by like October.
Do you think they're going to flip-flop back and forth between the two?
Hell yeah. They've already talked about it.
I think they are too. I think it's going to be fun because it's going to be like flavor of the week. But
so I don't know if you've watched a lot of CFL, Canadian Football League. I got really into it when we were the summer after sophomore year, I believe it was. Maybe it was the summer after junior year when I stayed at school for the summer and you stayed for like half of it.
Sure.
I got super into Canadian football because I needed to do something in that podunk town we went to school in. So in the CFL, they do a thing because short yardage is so important with one less down. They have what they call a short yardage quarterback, which is always just an athletic guy who has no ability to throw whatsoever. And they run like read option shit on 2nd and 1 or at the goal line. I have heard that the Steelers intend upon using Fields as a short yardage quarterback similar to the CFL.
Hell yeah. He's going to be the new Taysom Hill.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I got, which is incredible because it means they're effectively turning him into a wildcat running back. A special thought. I think it's possible Fields could win this job in camp because Russell Wilson is that washed, but I don't think it matters because I think either way, they certainly have a bottom 10 and may even have a bottom 3 starting quarterback. These are both really bad dudes.
It's bleak.
they're both coming from really advantageous situations with better offensive lines, good receivers, good offensive coaches, and now they're getting a downgrade in every single one of those things. Like, I love George Pickens. He's no DJ Moore. He's similar to Cortland Sutton. Arthur Smith, we'll get to in a moment. He's certainly not Sean Payton, and I don't think he's Luke Getsy.
They're going to run a lot.
They're going to run a lot, and that's part of why I also think Fields is going to win this starting job sooner than later, because fat old Russ ain't running anywhere anymore. So yeah, they're going to run the ball a ton, which is good because they have a run-blocking specialist offensive line. Like, each one of those guys is better at run blocking than he is at pass blocking. And they've got two running backs who can, well, I'm not going to say they're good, but they can certainly eat a lot of carries up because, like, they both can be starting running backs. So they're just going to run the ball a ton. And I don't think that's going to work very well at all against any of the three defenses they'll play this year.
Yeah, I mean, in a vacuum, it's not a terrible strategy of you have two decent running backs. You potentially have a quarterback that's very good at running the ball with a big, strong offensive line that is much better in the run game than the pass game. So you can just run a bunch and then chuck balls to George Pickens as you draw the defense in. So, like, in theory, it could work. It's just, as we're going to talk about, when we look at some of these other defenses, it might not go so well.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is maximizing the talent that they have. It's just that they don't have any talent, and that's a problem when you're playing football or really any other sport. Yeah, the Steelers' plan this year is to run the ball and play defense, and we've established that we don't think they'll be very good at the offense part, so they better be crushing it on defense, right? Right?
You'd hope.
Anakin and Padme meme, right? Well, the defensive line will be sick as all fuck. Alex Highsmith.
Usual.
Alex Highsmith's your guy. You told me before he ever played a game, this dude's going to be awesome. This dude's awesome. TJ Watt, maybe top 5, certainly top 10 edge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Cameron Hayward, no, he's not what he was, but he's still really good. And then Larry Ogunjobi, pretty decent. He'll never be as good as Fat Larry, but he's good. Yeah, so you've got a really solid 4-man front and a still pretty good 5-man front when you add Keanu Benton at nose tackle. The problems start behind those 5. Like, that's an A defensive line, maybe an A+, but behind that, Patrick Queen, that's going to be a fucking disaster. So the Steelers have kind of had a problem for the last 10 to 15 years where they can't find a linebacker who can play averagely in their system. And it's not that they forgot how to draft linebackers after being the best at drafting linebackers.
They found one.
Who?
He just died.
Oh, well, actually, that is what he didn't die. He can walk again, and he can cheat on his ex-wife. The reason Ryan Shazier worked for the Steelers is because he ran a legitimate 4-4. And what the Steelers do that makes life so incredibly impossible on their linebackers is they just spread their defensive backs out. They play a lot of cover 3 and cover 4, and they put their corners as far to the boundary as they can. They put their safeties nice and deep. They never rob them. So you've got your linebackers trying to cover 30 yards apiece. That's not a recipe for success. So they're just running too much. And unless you run a 4-4, it's not really sustainable or possible. It's why it's where linebackers have been going to die and or retire. It's over. You can't do that. So Patrick Queen is fast, but the problem with Patrick Queen has always been that he gets really, really lost in space. And like if a ball is in the air, he has a miniature seizure. That's like the worst possible combination for this spread out defense that requires him to be excellent in space. Elandon Roberts is suited for this kind of thing because he is a faster linebacker, but he's not actually good at any part of the game other than wanting to play it a lot. So that's bad linebackers. Their only hope is that they get double lucky because they were insanely lucky to get Peyton Wilson in the 3rd round of the draft. Peyton Wilson, no injuries, was like the 3rd or 4th player on my big board this year. He is Fred Warner light. He's so fast. He's really smart, great in coverage, former safety, and he can thump. He's a dream come true. I don't know. He fell to the 3rd round because of some injury concerns, which I'm not a doctor. Maybe they're real. Maybe they're not. I don't know. But if he cracks the starting lineup, and he should if it's based on merit, but as we know, perception is reality in the NFL and merit means nothing. If he cracks the starting lineup, he could really help that defense out and make the front 7 legitimately formidable. If he doesn't, tight ends are just going to eat this team up.
I think creative run games will destroy them as well.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you mean creative run games like Baltimore and Cleveland? Yeah, yeah. The ones that they're going to play a quarter of their season against? Correct.
Well, what about the defensive backs, Joe?
It's bleak. Dante Jackson has made tens of millions of dollars based on being fast in a straight line without football pads on. Because Lord knows he's terrible at football. Another guy who just doesn't understand how physics work when a ball is in the air. Another guy who just can't seem to keep track of his only responsibility, the guy he's covering. It's all a mental problem with him. There's nothing he couldn't do, but there's a ton he won't do. And then, I mean, they signed, who's the guy that they had and he went to Detroit? Cameron Sutton. Cameron Sutton is a perfectly mediocre slot cornerback, especially if you're playing zone. Remember how I was talking earlier about how the Steelers play really spread out zone defenses that make it really hard on their linebackers? Well, it makes it a lot easier on their cornerbacks. And that's the trade-off. But the problem is there's no amount of ease that will make Dante Jackson know where he is when the ball is thrown. There's no amount of, ease that will make Grayland Arnold, undrafted player who was apparently once with the Houston Texans, a starting cornerback. That being said, Joey Porter Jr. is good. He can be had. He's not fast, but he's good. He's like a legitimate B+ starting corner. But one corner an entire secondary does not make, especially with Cameron Sutton out for 8 weeks for mercilessly beating the shit out of his wife.
I was about to say, is he still on the team or did he get cut for that?
No. He got signed after he was suspended 8 games for beating the merciless shit out of his wife.
Ooh.
8 games. Facing 10 years in prison, I believe, but 8 games from the NFL. Innocent until proven guilty, right? No, we know.
Hey, what about Minkah Fitzpatrick, though? He was a highly drafted, highly touted player.
Yeah, and he's mostly sucked in the NFL. He is much better at safety than he was at corner. He's a lot like Brian Branch, where it's funny, people do this with SEC corners who aren't athletic. People are like, oh, he could do both. He's a corner and a safety. It's like, no, he's just a safety. Sorry, he's fine at it. Brian Branch is a better player, but Minkah Fitzpatrick is not a corner. Since he moved to safety, he's had 1 really good year, 2 not so good years, and 1 solid year. He's not going to have a good year. I mean, he's like 30. He graduated before we did, so he's like 30, and he's streaky, shall we say, even in his youth. So he's a B player at this point. What they lack in high-end safety play, they have in depth, like DeMonte Casey's a good backup. Miles Killebrew's a good backup. Deshaun Elliott's a good backup, but Deshaun Elliott is starting. So overall, I give this secondary like a C+. You're going to torch this team in the pass game if you max protect against their 2 killer defensive ends.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I feel like the entire team outside of the defensive line, the front 5, I guess, is average, sits around average, maybe a little bit above, maybe a little bit below. So you kind of go, how does the team win 9 games? Like, why are you not going under? But then it's this weird Steeler magic. Mike Tomlin drags every team to 500 or a playoff spot.
Yeah, one thing I struggle with, and I think a lot of people who bet on football games struggle with, is so turnovers are so incredibly important, right? And most of the time we think turnovers are luck. You can't force a quarterback to make a bad throw. You can't really force fumbles more than a running back will give you a fumble. It's all kind of random. But certain teams just keep on winning off of turnover luck. And the Steelers are one of them. And I think that there's something to it because I think quarterbacks make bad decisions when they're getting pinched by, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. I think running backs fumble more when they are running into a brick wall like Cameron Hayward. Like, I think that having a really explosive, overwhelming defensive line can lead to turnovers at a slightly higher rate than usual. And I do think that the Steelers will have more takeaways than your average team. And because they run the ball, they're probably going to have fewer giveaways. despite their turnover machine quarterbacks, because they won't be using them. This all being said, I don't think it's enough to win 9 fucking games.
Yeah, it's like, all right, I think they're going to be competitive in a lot of games because they will, shorten the game.
Yeah.
And they do have those studs on the D line. And George Pickens is very good when he's playing and engaged. The O-line's a lot better. They still have a very good coaching staff. So it's like, 500 is manageable, but I don't know. I think if I had to pick one, I'd go under, but wouldn't really want to pick it just because of their penchant for exceeding expectations.
I think this might be my best bet in the division. Under.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8.5? We're talking about this is a good team? No. And even if they were a good team, they're in a stacked division. Like, they're not going to win this division, and it's going to be really hard to come in 4th or 3rd place in your division with 10 wins, especially with shit quarterbacks and a bad offensive coordinator.
That's true. But, their schedule is probably because they finished fourth in their division last year, didn't they?
Or was they still got to play 6 games against the Browns, Ravens, and Bengals.
True.
That's half their season is against tough fucking teams. And then, who else are they playing that's 4th place in the NFC? The Bears. The Bears aren't a fucking cakewalk anymore. The Panthers, okay, cakewalk.
Cardinals?
Cardinals are better than they were. And then who was last place in the NFC East? Oh, the Redskins, who have at least much better coaching. Put simply, I think the Commanders are going to suck, and I could absolutely see the Commanders beating the Steelers. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Pretty sure they did it last year.
I don't know. I feel like that defense will really make Jaden Daniels have a rough day.
We're doing a different pod. Alas, for now, tentatively, under 8.5 is going to be my best bet in this division until I convince myself otherwise.
All right. Well, I think it wraps it up then for Pittsburgh. We can move on. And next up, we have the Cleveland Browns, also projected 8.5 wins.
Yeah, that right there is why I'm excited to fade the Steelers. So whereas I have the Steelers at 21 manually and 28 per my algorithm method, both agree that the Cleveland Browns are the 17th best team in football, right there in the middle of the pack, despite their terrible quarterback. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Reel it in.
Yeah. We'll go in the same order we always do. This team has an argument for best receiving core in the NFL.
It's a really good starting 3, and I think it encompasses everything you're looking for.
Yeah. So, off the top, Amari Cooper, probably the best route runner in the NFL. Like, just purely ability to get open with his brain rather than his feet and his speed and his size. The guy's always open. He's an impeccable route runner with excellent quickness and agility. He's serially underrated. Certainly a top 10 receiver. Then I don't know how they're going to do it. This depth chart seems to insinuate Jerry Jeudy is going to be in the slot. I don't agree. I think he'll be their Y.
Yeah, Elijah Moore will be in the slot.
Sorry, there's Z. Elijah Moore will be their S. But I love Jerry Jeudy. Now, he's never put up the stats because his quarterbacks have been Russell Wilson. Remember the guy we talked about last team? And before Russell Wilson, it was Trevor Siemian.
Well, that, and he had Case Keenum, I think. And then he had, what's his name that's in Seattle now?
Drew Lock. Good.
Drew Lock.
Yeah. So, no, that's not fair. You can't judge Jerry Jeudy based on that. We're talking about one of the best receiver prospects I've ever seen, probably the 2nd or 3rd best out of Bama in this last 5-10 years. The guy's incredible. Like, the comp for him is Odell Beckham, but without all the head fuck. He's just super quick.
His issue is health more than anything.
His issues have been health and production. And the production, like, if you're a Jerry Jeudy critic, 1, YDKB, you don't know ball. But 2, like, the only thing you can really point at in his game is like, oh, he has drops. It's like, well, drops from Russell Wilson and Case Keenum are different than drops. His hands are not great, but they're fine. And he's open constantly, and he's a huge threat with the ball in his hands. Again, he's Odell Beckham. Finally, Elijah Moore. He hasn't blossomed yet, but his quarterbacks have been Zach Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and the ghost of Joe Flacco. I don't know. I don't blame him. Moore is a fantastic... What's that?
I said I loved him coming out. I'm still upset that he hasn't really broken out. I agree that it's been some of the quarterback, but I don't know. I feel like he's got to put it together at a certain point.
No, I agree. He should put it together this year. Just because you got to do something. Like you got to at least be a really big threat as the third weapon on a stacked wide receiving core. But coming out,
physical talent.
Yeah, coming out, he looked a lot. Well, this is kind of funny because AJ Brown completely and totally reshaped his game and body within the span of a summer. How could you do that naturally? You can't. It's called Trenibol. It's amazing. AJ Brown and Elijah Moore had very similar body types and games coming out of Ole Miss. Now, Moore never got on the trend. Maybe he should have, so that he could become an elite ball-winning outside receiver at 6 foot, like A.J. Brown did, because Tren. But alas, A.J. Brown was still really good before he became the strongest man alive. And I think that Elijah Moore has that opportunity. He can be that. And it's kind of like the Justin Herbert conversation, right? Like you get so tired of making excuses that at some point you just throw your hands up and say, I don't know, if he's not going to do it, then he's not going to do it. But I think that year 3 is too early to give up on a guy when he's had such ridiculous circumstances. So I love this receiving core. I give it an A- to an A. And that's before you add David Njoku, who still can't catch, but his athleticism cannot be argued with. And he's become a top 10 NFL tight end.
Yeah, I mean, he's always going to have his drops. Like that's just a thing that you have to accept with him. But he is so fast and so big and just so generally athletic that he can outjump guys.
He's fluid. A lot of tight ends are like 6'5" and they weigh 270, but it's like kind of like a cumbersome 270. He's 270 and like that's his walking around weight. Like he would be that weight if he didn't play football. He's comfortably that size, which is insane.
Yeah, so it's like, you're going to live with some drops because he's going to do some stuff or create some plays that just very few other guys can.
Yeah.
So, like, he's not a top 3 or top 5 guy, but I agree. He's top 10 and he's just exciting.
Yeah. And like he can take something house at any given moment and he's going to get space because secondaries are going to be really pressed to cover all 3 of those legitimate feature caliber receivers. Like you could legitimately base your receiving core around Jerry Jeudy being a 1. I know that feels uncomfortable to say because it hasn't really been done. But we're talking about a guy who was an obvious top 10 pick, despite sharing a team with Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. He was the best one. So Jerry Jeudy's a no-brainer. I think he's awesome. Awesome receiving core. Nick Chubb is back.
I really hope so.
I do
love that, man.
I mean, he's probably 27 now? I
think he's older. I think he might be 28.
One way or another. Those are scary numbers for an NFL running back, especially coming off of a torn Achilles.
Torn knee. That was where his knee, like...
Oh, it was just the knee? He's fine.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah, no, it was gruesome. It was terrible.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's maybe a little bit more worrisome is that's the second time that's happened because he did that at Georgia too.
I remember. Let's assume that he's the guy he was. He's the best running back in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, he's not the best weapon out of the backfield because, McCaffrey's better at running routes and catching. But if you just are handing the ball off, it's Nick Chubb every day. The best. I don't believe in Jerome Ford. I think he sucks. But Nyheim Hines, weapon. Dante Foreman must have fucked somebody's daughter because I don't understand how you can average 5 yards a carry in 4 different offenses and nobody lets him start. And it's not like he's from some small school. He went to fucking Texas. He was a star at Texas and nobody will let him play. It's ridiculous. Regardless, the Browns have running back depth and they might have the best running back in the NFL. And Kevin Stefanski, for all of his pussydom, can scheme up a run game. Real good. Wide zone out of the Sean McVay. I feel like there's 3 branches on that offense now. There's the Shanahans, which is like Shanahan, Slowick, McDaniel. And then there's the McVays, which is like McVay and Shane Waldron, and then Liam Cohen and Kevin O'Connell. And then I feel like there's a 3rd branch, which is the LaFleur branch, which is like Matt LaFleur, Kevin Stefanski, Luke Getsy, those guys who run like the more run-heavy, stoic power game. This is that stoic power game. Stefanski fits in that Matt LaFleur branch. And it's not always the most flashy or entertaining, but god damn is it effective. And you look up and suddenly the quarterback's got 250 yards passing without doing a single difficult thing. Shout out Packers. Real smart job paying Jordan Love. So the Browns' skill players are formidable. Again, A to A- receivers, A to B+ running backs, depending on if Nick Chubb is still Nick Chubb. Offensive line, long the strength of the Browns hasn't stopped being good. And it might even be better. This might be the best Browns offensive line yet. So hear me out. Jack Conklin, probably not what he once was, but still a good tackle. Wyatt Teller, probably not an all-pro, because that seemed a little bit like a flash in the pan, but a really great guard. Joel Bitonio is ageless. He's always great. And then it feels like he won't be great, but he's still great.
Future Hall of Famer.
Yep. I love Ethan Pocic. He's really good.
They do too. They signed him to an extension.
And his backup is Brian Allen, who's a legitimately good starting center in this league, especially in a wide zone offense where he can get out in space because he's quick. Chicago boy as well. The one weak spot for years has been Jedrick Wills, which was a terrible pick. They fucked up. But it might not matter because...
He doesn't care enough. So he doesn't care enough.
No, he's a C+. He's a fine enough tackle, but he's not good. Dawan Jones is at least a B, and he might be an A-. I fucking really like Dawan Jones.
Yeah, I mean, he's great. He did a great job last year because that is the other issue with Jack Conklin is that he doesn't play anymore.
Well, so that's the thing.
Because he tears something in his knee or breaks his leg every 4 games.
I think it's very likely that Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin do not play for most of the season, at least as intended. I think Dawan Jones probably steals the starting spot from Jedrick Wills, and then Jack Conklin gets hurt, and your fourth tackle, your second swing tackle, is Hakeem Adeniji, which is a bad starting tackle. Bengals fans know all the woes with him and Joe Burrow, but he's an excellent backup, and for all the warts, a lot of Hakeem Adeniji's bad reputation comes from Joe Burrow being arrogant in the pocket and thinking he's an athlete. He's not an athlete. He's just a tall Macaulay Culkin.
Even when not talking about the Bengals and Joe Burrow, we still find a way.
You can't be closer to talking about the Bengals than talking about the Browns. They're literally meant to be clones of each other. Either way, the only question I have on this offensive line that prevents me from giving it a straight up A, they did lose Bill Callahan.
They lost their seer.
Now, what does that mean? I don't know. And actually, this website doesn't tell me who their new offensive line coach is. I'm sure it's someone good, but nobody's Bill Callahan. So that's the one question mark on the offense, except, of course, for the quarterback. The AFC North is literally just a who's who of quarterbacks that I said weren't good, and then people told me I was wrong, and then they weren't good. I've been saying Deshaun Watson's not good since his first year in Houston, and everybody told me I was really stupid for like 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then they told me I was super definitely stupid when he won 4 games and put up some stats in garbage time. Shout out to, I think it was Tej Seth for PFF saying that Deshaun Watson's 2020 is arguably the greatest quarterback season of all time. A season where they won 4 games. By the way, Davis Mills won more games the next year as a rookie with the same roster and a worse coach. That's a thing that happened. I'm not a QB wins guy, but Jesus, fuck my ass. So yeah, Deshaun Watson's basically always sucked, and it's never been more apparent than the last 2 years. I'm sure Browns fans will be rushing in to say he was just rusty. Right. How many years do you get to be rusty? He's been rusty for longer than he didn't play.
Yeah, and like you can use the he's been rusty, but he's also been hurt. Where like even if you want to say, well, he's working his way back for 2 years. He hasn't played because he's also been hurt, which is bad.
It's attrition. It means that he's not ever going to be the same.
It's not good when your quarterback can't stay healthy. And when if it takes this long for him to knock off rust, it's not good if he's getting hurt every 4 games.
Yeah, because then he's never going to knock off the rust.
Knock off more rust.
They built the whole ship out of the rust.
Man, he had like that one really good half where they beat Baltimore last year.
Yep.
And I feel like that bought him another like year of good faith with a chunk of Browns fans.
Yes. Luckily for Browns fans, they have once again for the 3rd straight year found a backup quarterback who's better than their starter. Enter Jameis Winston.
I need him to play like at least 8 games this year.
Alex, I'm not even joking a little bit. I think if Jameis Winston starts 17 games, this team is a contender. I think they win the division with Jameis Winston, which that's not love for Jameis Winston. I think he's a perfectly average bridge. Like he's a bridge quarterback. He's a good bridge quarterback, but he's an average starter. And I think that that is leagues better than what we saw out of Flacco and what we will see out of Watson. I think you need to be so fucking mediocre to make this team unstoppable, and nobody can do it.
I agree, but I also I don't really understand why they signed Jameis. Not because he's not a good player, because I like Jameis. I think he's fine. Like, he's not good. I don't really want him to be the starter for my team, but
he is funny.
Absolutely. And he's a good backup.
Yeah.
But I feel like he plays the type of football that Kevin Stefanski hates.
Correct.
Like, he plays similar to the Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield. Like, he's chucking the ball downfield. And he's not always going to be very good at just, like, doing the game manager thing. And that drives Stefanski insane. Like, the reason he liked the corpse of Joe Flacco and why they were still winning games is because he was just doing what he was supposed to.
The same reason Jacoby Brissett was so successful in that system. He just ran the play through the drag, let it get yak.
So I do think that Jameis might struggle a little bit there because Stefanski's going to be in a pretzel over the idea of being like consistently aggressive, but he's still probably a better option than Deshaun because Deshaun just can't throw well enough.
Yeah, the Browns have serious issues at quarterback. And again, like we saw, Joe Flacco wasn't good in 2023. He just didn't always completely suck. And it only takes a C- quarterback to turn this team into a juggernaut. The problem is that Deshaun Watson has been a D to D- quarterback.
He just can't throw the ball deep and is so inconsistent.
And he can't think quickly. I don't know what there's no solution. The solution might literally just be the defense, because literally everything about this team is amazing except for their quarterback. 3-play Myles Garrett.
Stud.
Is he the best defensive player? Maybe not, in which case he's like 2. You can't go lower than 3 without me scoffing. Zadarius Smith is good. He's not great. He's good. He's like a B+ guy. They finally have defensive tackles. Shelby Harris and Dalvin Tomlinson. That would send shivers down every offensive guard's spine 5 years ago. They're not those guys anymore, but they're still good. And at least you won't be able to gash the Browns up the middle for 5 yards of carry on halfback dive anymore.
And hometown kid, Mike Hall Jr.
Oh, okay.
I like Mike Hall.
I mean, I think he could start, not on this team. Nothing inspires me about his game.
But they have depth in general there. Like, they still have Mo Hurst, who did really well in limited appearances last year.
Shit, yeah. They still have Siaka Ika, who's just ridiculously strong. They love getting Polynesian dudes who are ridiculously strong and then never letting them play football.
I think Tommy Togiai just couldn't really play football.
No, he never could. But he was ridiculously strong.
He was.
So their defensive line is an A, if only because Myles Garrett is that good and the other pieces don't suck.
Yeah, they've got good depth on top of an elite difference maker.
The linebackers are probably the best they've been. JOK is really, really good. That's another guy who doesn't play a ton of football, though, because he's small. He's going to get hurt.
He plays more than you'd expect, but yeah, that's one of those things that you're just always going to be kind of worried about him.
Yeah, he's like 6 foot 210. Like, yeah, it's a safety. I love him, but the practical reality is he's going to be banged up a lot. Jordan Hicks is fine coverage linebacker. You know, he's not a hole in your defense. And the Browns don't believe in having good linebackers. They believe in not having really bad linebackers. Enter Devin Bush, a really bad linebacker.
Yes, I'd say. And blowing that theory out of the water is Devin Bush.
He could legitimately lose his starting job to Tony Fields, who I actually kind of like. He is smart, but not athletic. Let's call it a B- linebacker core. JOK makes it good enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very good. I think maybe it's a C+ even, but because I think Devin Bush is bad. Devin Bush is bad. Jordan Hicks is fine.
I agree with you, but then moving to the secondary, they use Grant Delpit like a linebacker because he is.
Yeah.
And I think he's good. When Grant Delpit is within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, I think he's really good. When he's beyond that, I think he's really bad. And I think the Browns have finally caught on, like, well, we need to just put this guy in the box.
It took forever for them to figure it out, despite it being plainly obvious when he was in college, too. But they have, I think it might have just been Jim Schwartz, and it wasn't Joe Woods and
Wilkes. The first time they don't have a remarkably cowardly defensive coordinator who runs soft cover 3 and cover 4 all the time.
Yeah.
You can't run soft cover 4 without having 2 safeties way deep back. So Schwartz loves to play cover 1, which is great because you have 1 coverage safety and 1 linebacker who calls himself a safety. Speaking of the coverage safety, I love Juan Thornhill.
Always have.
They've accumulated, since we stopped being Browns fans, they have accumulated so many players we always liked.
Yeah. Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy.
They've basically done everything right since getting rid of Baker Mayfield. But the problem is that they got rid of Baker Mayfield, and he would legitimately have them as a Super Bowl favorite.
I don't want to pod anymore.
Alas. You don't want to pod anymore. Finishing out the secondary and ending the Browns conversation. Greg Newsom's dope, and he hasn't been paid yet, so he will continue to be dope. As soon as he gets that paycheck, he will not be dope. Martin Emerson, he's really awesome at the thing he does, which is just be a big physical, like, X-receiver eraser. Don't ask him to cover a slant or a dig, but as long as it stays on the outside and it stays vertical, he's got him. He's just so big and strong and has great ball skills. And then when the moon is in just the right phase and the temperature is between 57 and 62 degrees, Denzel Ward emerges from the blue tent and plays football. And he's really fucking great at it. But he is also always injured because he is 5'9" and like
he's
190.
so tiny.
Yeah, he's
so
tiny.
Good.
What's crazy is at 5'9", 190, he's particularly good at guarding dudes like Jamar Chase, who are jump ball artists. He's so bouncy and he's got great ball skills. He's always in phase. I love me some Denzel Ward. When healthy, this is an A- secondary. They got 3 legit fucking corners and a really good safety and then a linebacker call the safety. But that's a really good lineup, and it makes for a really good defense because their defensive line is really good and their back end is really good. In the middle, that's where you eat them, but easier said than done.
Yeah, I mean, but you have Jim Schwartz, who's a very good defensive coordinator and gets to deploy Myles fucking Garrett.
Yeah. Myles Garrett is really, we could have ended after Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
He's
just one of those guys where he makes everyone else better because the offense has to pay so much attention to him.
Yeah. No, we used to joke back in the Browns days, like Myles Garrett shows up on 3 plays per game because it is frustrating how good he is, but how often he's not dominating, which is just the nature of playing defensive line. But the joke was that like, oh, here's Myles to make one of his 3 plays today. And like, it sounds bad, but if you get 3 tackles for loss every game, you're going to be the best defensive end of all time.
Yeah. And like, if you get a sack in the closing moments or on like a big 4th down or whatever, like that's a very important sack to get that quite literally could win you the game. And he does a lot of that stuff where he plays the best football in big moments.
And it's funny because 3-play Myles Garrett has gone from being like, oh, Myles Garrett makes 3 good plays a game to Myles Garrett will make 3 game-changing plays per game. Like, it's still 3 plays, but now it's an unheard of level. Myles Garrett is insanely special, and this defense is really good. Now, after how many amazing players we listed off, and considering that Kevin Stefanski, while conservative, I don't think this will be the year he opens up the offense, but he has told us this is the year he opens up the offense again. Every year. But I think we can agree, way better coach than the Steelers have, way better roster on both sides of the ball than the Steelers have, same win total.
Yeah, one of these has to give.
And that's why we're betting the under on the Steelers. As for the Browns, I can't bet the over because Deshaun Watson, but I can't bet the under because Jameis Winston. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick one on the Browns, I would probably go over just because I don't think Deshaun has to be any good.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, he's been actively bad, but like not that big of a gap between the two. And with how good the rest of the team is.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he just has to exist. But we'll see. I mean, I don't feel strongly enough to say, like, let's bet it. So instead, let's move on. The third team in the AFC North, we are going to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Their projected win total is at 10.5.
Yeah, this is tough. Start with the wide receivers. Looks like T. Higgins going to stay for at least one more year. They did lose Tyler Boyd, who is good, but then they added Jermaine Burton, who's amazing when he's not punching ladies in the head.
is important to not do that.
You can't punch ladies in the head. Apparently, he also punched coaches. Don't do that. That being said, when on the field and not punching people, really good at football. I also don't mind Andre Isovius or whatever the hell Greek guy from Princeton. And then Joe Burrow seems to really like Trenton Irwin. What does that say about Joe Burrow? No, Trenton Irwin's a perfectly consummate slot receiver. The one thing that I think is getting underrated is that the Bengals have the best tight end they've probably ever had in the Joe Burrow era in Mike Gesicki. Remember when they turned CJ Uzama into like a big ticket free agent by way of him simply existing and not dropping wide open easy passes? Mike Gesicki's better than that. A lot better than that.
He's just a wide receiver playing tight end, but
yeah, which is better. I'd rather fuck running the ball. I'm not running the ball.
Well, Zach Moss is their number one running back, so.
Well, hold on, because it's not that bad. So I think we can agree A to A plus receiving core, if only because T. Higgins plus Jamar Chase.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the two of them are very, very good.
The Twin Towers, despite the fact that Jamar Chase is only 6'1". He plays like he's 6'4". Moving on to the offensive line.
Gone.
Well, yeah, no, both of those dudes are out the door. And then the Bengals will be so fucked.
It's going to be so funny.
It's going to be amazing watching Joe Burrow try to throw suicide jump balls to regular men. That being said, this is probably the best offensive line the Bengals have had in the Joe Burrow era. The tackles, Trent Brown and Orlando Brown, freakishly large, strong humans. Neither of them are athletic, but they're really good at their job. They're both B-plus tackles. They can block, maybe not awesome in the run game, real good in the pass game. Alex Kappa and Cordell Volson, fine. Add in Cody Ford as a third, like a swing guard. All three of those dudes are fine guards. They're not great, but they're fine. And then finally, Ted Karras. Ted Karras is, well, I guess he's fine. So on the outside, we're looking at B plus A minus. On the inside, we're looking at B minus, maybe, but probably B. Also, keep your eye on Amarius Mims, their first round pick. I thought he was the second best offensive tackle in the draft. He didn't play a lot because he was hurt, and he only had 1 year as a starter, but he's 6'7". He's a freak athlete, and the man just was so quick. He did not get beaten a lot in pass blocking. Good offensive line. I give it a B plus.
Yeah, it's a good O-line.
Zach Moss is not great. I don't think he's a huge downgrade from Joe Mixon. I've always been a little higher on Zach Moss than most. I think he's like a B minus running back. I really like Chase Brown, the backup, the guy to Illinois, real fast, great with the ball in his hands. I think he'll eventually become the starter, but the Bengals don't run the ball.
I knew much of anything about Chase Brown.
Oh, Chase Brown's you'll like him. He's slippery and fast. He's small. He's skinny, but he was a bell cow at Illinois, and I think he's who they had in mind when they got rid of Joe Mixon. That said, they don't run the ball much in Cincinnati. They love spreading it out and throwing short passes. Their running game is their quick passing game. And whether that's Jake Browning or Joe Burrow, we've seen it doesn't make a fucking difference. So on one hand, I think Joe Burrow is probably the most overrated quarterback in the NFL and arguably in my lifetime. But, it might also be Tua. But it doesn't matter. Like Jake Browning, a bad backup who was cut from multiple practice squads and undrafted, small, no athletic skills to speak of, made them a contender. Like, as long as Joe Burrow isn't as awful as he was in the beginning of last year, which was legitimately bottom 10, maybe bottom 5 starting quarterback caliber, they will be a really good offense because they have a really smart head coach / play caller. They have a good enough, arguably good line, and they have a sick wide receiving core.
Yeah, I mean, it has the potential to be a really good offense, like a top 5, but I think no matter what, it should be top 10, top 8, just because they have really good players at the important positions. And Joe Burrow is very overrated, but he's good at doing what you ask him to.
Yeah, let's call it what he is. He's a good game manager.
Yeah, he is. And I think we rag on him a lot for not doing impressive stuff, but I do give him a lot of credit for just having the confidence or trust in how good his receivers are to throw as many just insane jump balls and give his receivers the opportunities, because a lot of guys are afraid to do it.
Yeah.
Where the ultimate option that we talked about last week is Derek Carr, where there are times where maybe you do just chuck it in the air. And I think Kirk Cousins is an example of a guy that did kind of learn that. And it's why the Vikings were so good with Justin Jefferson as him, because he would just go, all right, my receiver is better than anything they can throw at us. So just chuck him the ball. So I think there is value on that offense that even though Joe Burrow isn't that good, he just doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best example of the thing that you're describing is, do you remember probably 2013? Jay Cutler got hurt and Josh McCown at like 40 years old replaced him for the Bears. And they went on a tear because Josh McCown was old enough that he didn't give a fuck. Like an old dog will eat the trash right in front of you. Like he would just throw the ball into double coverage 10 feet in the air. And oh no, Alshon Jeffrey is that big. He will go get it. Oh, Brandon Marshall can just be taller than everybody. Yeah. Whereas like Jay Cutler was trying to play football. No, don't play football. It's keep away. Just throw it up high. And like, so Joe Burrow does have that fuck it mentality in the right way. He's not reckless. It's just, yeah, he trusts his dudes and his dudes are worth trusting.
Yeah. So I think that that's like one thing that's hard to quantify that is valuable about him, and why it makes them better, even though you can't really argue with the production not changing between him and Jay Browning.
I was going to say, I would agree with you, and I did think there was something to that until I saw Jake fucking Browning produce better efficiency stats. Like, Jake Browning's EPA in 7 games last year with the Bengals was better than Joe Burrow's in 2022 when healthy. Like, there is no difference.
Well, let's talk about the defense.
Well, hold on, because I forgot to do this earlier. As much as I rag on Joe Burrow, the algorithm has the Bengals as the 10th best team in the league. My manual ranking has them 5th. So it's one of those things kind of like the Browns. They don't need a good quarterback. They've done everything else right. Like the stud receivers, the good line. We're about to talk about the defense. I think the defense taking a step back is their biggest threat. Start with White Lightning, their defensive ends, Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. I like Hendrickson a lot. I like Hubbard enough. I see the upside in Miles Murphy, their first round pick 2 years ago out of Clemson. Just super powerful and pretty quick. Like, I think that there's something there, at least as a rotational rusher. So I like their defensive ends. And then BJ Hill, good defensive tackle. Sheldon Rankings, great nose guard. Add in Chris Jenkins out of Michigan. They're 3 deep on the defensive tackles again. So their defensive line, sick. B+, A-. Not as good as the Browns, but really good.
Yeah.
Then their linebackers. I love Jermaine Pratt. He's really good in coverage. I love Logan Wilson. He's super fast. Fuck. How do they get all these fast white dudes on their defense? They got like all the fast white dudes. Here's where I think that they're going to struggle, and I don't think that people are accounting for it. They lost Chido Awuzie, who was a monster.
Yeah, he did really well.
He's a Titan now, and they replaced him with DJ Turner. No.
That's not good.
It's not DJ Hayden, thank God, but DJ Turner he's not Cheeto. I think he can be good. I see the upside, I do, but I don't think he's ready to start, and I don't think he's ready to fill the shoes of being a number 1 corner. Across from him will still be Cam Taylor-Britt. Cam Taylor-Britt's big. He's another guy kind of like Emerson in Cleveland. He's big and he's really good at what he does, but you gotta ask him to do certain things. Cover 4, cover 3, great. Cover 2, man, not as great. And then Mike Hilton in the slot, verbal meme, Jesse Pinkman. He can't keep getting away with this. The man has to age at some point.
He's so old.
And he's just been the same, like, above average slot corner for, it feels like, my entire life.
Yes. He's good. He's aggressive. He's perfect in the slot.
No, he's exactly what you want. So I think they're going to take a small step back on the the cornerbacks just because they lost their number 1 guy and replaced him with a young, unproven corner. And then their safeties, I think they're kind of fucked. Last year, Von Bell played really well. That's a flash in the pan. Von Bell has a long established career of not being very good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Geno Stone, another dude old now, coming from Baltimore, in Baltimore's very well-curated scheme, mid. I think he will continue to be mid. And then their third safety, because they do use three safeties very often, is Dax Hill, who I never really believed in. He's athletic, but like kind of a tweener. Too small to be a linebacker, not fast enough to be a defensive back. I don't know what you do with him. And there's a reason he's not penciled in as the starter despite being a second or a third year first round pick.
And there were a lot of people that were really excited, but I was kind of in that same boat where he just wasn't good enough at anything that you were like, oh, we can actually stick him here. there. It's like the Jabril Peppers thing.
Exactly.
Where it's like you have a lot of talent and you're really good at a lot of things. You're just not good enough at any one thing.
Well, and I think that his path to success will probably be very similar to Jabril Peppers, where at a certain point, the Patriots were like, Jabril, you're just a linebacker. And he's good at it. And that's what he was. And the funny thing is, that's what Jabril Peppers was good at Michigan. Like they brought him in as a corner and didn't really work. They put him at safety. It didn't really work. They put him at linebacker and he was a stud. So he gets drafted in the first round and they stick him back out at defensive back. Guys, let the guy do the thing he's proven to be good at. It's the only thing that's worked, regardless. It's a good defense. It's not a great one. Lou Anarumo's a really good defensive coordinator, but defense more than offense is a lot about the Joes, not the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. So you can run your exotic drop 8 coverages. You can run lots of disguised zones, but at a certain point, the fact that you have 2 slow-ass box safeties playing your halo safety positions is going to bite you. The fact that you don't have a number 1 cornerback who is versatile enough to handle different kinds of route concepts is going to bite you. I think they can be good. I don't think they can be great. I give it a B.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think this team is good, not great.
But so you got a good defense. You've got a very good, maybe great offense. You still got a great head coach who's, active and aggressive in crunch time. 10.5 is rich. I think they're going to get right around that number. Like, I don't think they're a 13-win team, but I certainly don't think they're a 9-win team. You also have insurance because God forbid Joe Burrow gets hurt. It doesn't matter. Like, the number doesn't change for me. So I can't bet it, but for all the rhetoric and for all I love discussing how bad Joe Burrow is. I don't think it really materially matters when handicapping the team as a whole. Like, the stats are the stats for a reason. It's just about who gets credit. I think you should give more credit to the receivers and coaching, but the credit still needs to go to someone, and they're wearing tiger stripes.
Right. It doesn't matter for as far as wins and losses, which is all we're talking about right now.
Yep. All right. Should we cap it off?
Let's finish her up. And to cap off the AFC North, we have the Baltimore Ravens with a projected win total of 11.5.
Yeah, and my power rankings, the algorithm has them as the second best team in the league. My hand rankings have them at 10. They're really good. That said, I think that, we'll get to it. Start off with the wide receivers. Hey, remember for years when they said that they never gave Lamar receivers? He's got some fucking receivers.
In fairness, they got him receivers last year, and then he did win MVP again. So
with 3,200 yards passing, like fairness. That wasn't bullshit at all. Looking back, it is actually fucking insane that ESPN just decided Lamar Jackson's going to win MVP because fuck Josh Allen. Like, how is that even close? Doesn't matter. Zay Flowers, I love. BC boy.
Yeah, I mean, credit to you because you were all over him coming out.
Mini Antonio Brown, and it is looking correct. One day Rashad Bateman might pop off the way that they always say he will. I doubt it, but I still think he's a fine receiver, a perfectly fine wide receiver too. And I love me some Nelson Aguilar.
He's great at what he does.
Great at what he does. Not to mention they got one of my other personal favorites, Deontay Hardy, the super amazingly quick, fast guy from Buffalo. I don't know why he can't play the slot. I don't know if he's just afraid of footballs or what, but when he has the ball in his hands, he is terrifying. And I really do believe that Todd Monken will be creative at finding ways to get him the ball, because Todd Monken was throwing screens to Brock Bowers. If you can design a tight end screen, you can certainly define a wide receiver screen. And then finally, Tez Walker. Tez Walker's not good, but he is tall and fast. He will drop some poorly thrown deep balls by Lamar Jackson. I am sure of it. B+?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Now we go to the tight ends. They have 3 starting tight ends. Mark Andrews is a top 5 tight end. People forget because he's hurt lately. He's still really amazing.
He's always hurt.
Isaiah Likely is a legitimately good starting tight end. He should start on 15 teams. Maybe 10 teams. And then Charlie Kolar never gets a chance to play football, but when he does, especially in preseason, he looks like a baller. And I really liked him coming out of Iowa State. Probably an A- receiving core if you count the tight ends.
Very good.
Running back
better because Zay Flowers could pop off and turn truly elite.
Yeah, he could be actual Antonio Brown, but without all the posts about which kind of person of the day Shane Gillis is. Moving to running backs, Listen, Derrick Henry is washed, but he's not Keaton Mitchell. So he's still going to get his yards because they're going to run the ball, and you do have to respect Lamar Jackson.
And if they use him, maybe a little bit more strategically than he has been used in his career, where he's kind of just a power back for him, he'll do well in that role. I mean, that O-line, which we'll talk about in a second, is built for that type of game. So I think he'll be productive.
Let's talk about it right now. Ben Cleveland, mauler. Ronnie Stanley, really great tackle. He's more of a pass blocker, but he's still a great tackle on both sides of the blocking. I don't know. Both sides of the line of scrimmage, because you're downfield when you run block and you're behind it when you pass. Yeah, that's how we'll do it.
Sure.
He could do both things.
Both phases of the offense.
I like Roger Rosengarten. He's a mauler type tackle. And God forbid he doesn't win the starting job. I've always been a huge fan of Daniel Faalele.
You have been.
Well, because he's just two people. Like, he's 400 pounds. How do you not get stopped by him? Also, Tyler Linderbaum, stud. And then Andrew Voorhees, they got in the 7th round a year ago. So you're thinking, like, why they have a 7th round dude starting? Andrew Voorhees would have been a 1st round pick if he didn't have a really scary injury, like, right before the draft. He's really good. I think he gave up 1 sack his last year at USC. Like, he would have been a legit 1st round pick if not for pure injury, and not like, oh, degenerative, but like, no, just he got injured right next to the draft and people were like, I don't know if he's going to play. I love Andrew Voorhees. So I love this entire offensive line again, because the Ravens have one of the best GMs in the NFL again, because the NFC North, or AFC North rather, has 3 or 4 of the 5 to 10 best GMs in the NFL. I don't know about Omar Khan in Pittsburgh, but they still have enough of the, what's the guy before him?
Colbert.
Yeah, they have enough Colbert still rubbing off on them that I say you're in. And I think that Duke Tobin is probably the best GM in the entire NFL.
Fun fact, he has.
You know how people always talk about, like, oh, you can't know, you don't scout, you're not a scout, you don't have scouts, like these entire front offices, they spend millions of dollars. Yeah, the Bengals probably have the best front office in the league, and Duke Tobin, one guy, runs the entire scouting department by watching film on his computer. They have like 5 scouts in the entire team. So like, he literally does what I do, and he's the best. He's the best.
He's great. Well, it's also just because they only get like $400,000 for their entire front office salary.
Well, exactly. They can't afford a scout to go and ask his player, like, are you an alcoholic? No, they can't afford it. They send him a Twitter DM, and then the electricity bill runs them over budget. So yeah, the offense is going to be sick. And then Lamar Jackson gives Joe Burrow a good run for his money when it comes to most overrated quarterback in the NFL. But he has improved as a passer. He is no longer wretched. He is now bad. And he is a great runner. And he's young. I think he's still like 26.
Yeah, I mean, he came in when he was very young.
He came in at just barely 20. So he's still young. I don't think he's going to lose his running ability anytime soon. Do I think he's an MVP? Fuck no. But I do think he's a middle of the pack value quarterback, and certainly the best if you are looking to have an exotic run-based offense. And that's what they do. No, he can't process worth a goddamn, but he doesn't need to, because nobody's going to rush him because they're terrified that he'll just run around them. It is a very tricky concept to try to play defense against him, because he is terrifying. So I don't think Lamar Jackson's good, and I never think he'll beat a legitimately good offense, because I don't think he's got 50 points in a legitimately competitive game in his bag. So I don't think he'll ever beat, Bills, Chiefs, etc. when it matters. They're going to win a lot of regular season games, and this offense will be very dangerous while they do it. On to the defense. The Ravens play a new kind of defense. It's weird. It's like a 3-3-3 defense almost. Like, they have 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and 3 safeties usually. And then Kyle Hamilton, one of the safeties, is kind of just a 4th linebacker anyway. It's messy and it's confusing, and that's why it's so successful. But their basic philosophy is, our defensive line is just going to be a bunch of big motherfuckers that you can't run on. Their job isn't to rush the passer. Their job is to not let you run the ball. And then they get their pressures and their sacks with exotic and weird blitzes and sim pressures by sending other dudes. The wild card is, remember David Ojabo?
Yeah.
Apparently, he's supposed to be finally actually healthy.
Is he?
Probably not. And he is like 25 already, but he is an amazing athlete and a good football player. So like, there's a chance we got something here. I don't know if it's going to manifest itself in anything, but there's a chance. And then at linebacker, Roquan Smith is very good. Trenton Simpson is fine. And Kyle Van Noy / Kyle Hamilton is a very good third line. Like Kyle Hamilton, let's call it what it is. He mostly plays linebacker. PFF, if you look at his splits, PFF says he plays a lot of slot. If you actually look at the screenshot of the film, it's not really slot. It's just he's an outside linebacker that's overhanging the line. So he's kind of standing where a slot corner would, but he's doing linebacker things most of the time. That's what I think he is, and I think he's amazing at it. I think when you ask him to be a true coverage safety or coverage corner, I don't think he's very good. I think he's beatable. I think he's decent. But he doesn't have to, because look at the rest of this fucking secondary, dude. Marlon Humphrey, stud. Marcus Williams, stud free safety. Eddie Jackson from the Bears, at one point was an all-pro caliber safety. He's lost a step, but he's still a B+.
Yeah, he's still good. And I'm curious to see what happens when he's on a good team.
Yeah,
because
when
it feels like he kind of stopped caring a little bit too.
There's a 100% chance he did. I also adore their first round pick, Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. Very twitchy, remarkable hops, very good corner. Brandon Stevens is fine as a cornerback too if Nate Wiggins isn't ready. And sneaky, I love Trayvon Mullen. I think he's another guy who's finally on a good team, and maybe he can do something with his career.
He has bounced around a good amount, though, hasn't he?
He has, but we're looking at a fourth corner here. They also have Jalen Armour Davis, a guy who's never played football because he was even banged up in college constantly, but all the athletic tools. And Arthur Mollett from Pittsburgh, who is just the perfect depth veteran. This team has no holes. They play a weird style of football that will certainly make sure they're always in every regular season game, but it also limits them against really good teams. They're going to have a really hard time beating the true contenders, which is why they're in a weird second tier of their own with a very definite ceiling, but a very high floor. Also, like John Harbaugh, he's just a really good decision maker. He's very strategic. He doesn't call plays on either side, but he knows how to surround himself with smart people, and he really understands game theory, which matters.
Absolutely. I think Harbaugh is one of those guys where it's very rare when a non-offensive coach is worth it. And Harbaugh is not even a defensive coach. Like, he was a special teams guy.
Yeah.
But he's so good at, I think, understanding talent and understanding, like, putting talent in the right position, because they've altered their offense and their defense over the course of his, tenure as head coach a lot. Like, very drastically, even from year to year. They went from being a Super Bowl team with Joe fucking Flacco, like statue, let's bomb the ball, to Lamar Jackson, who is kind of the exact opposite of that.
Totally is.
He's so good that he has a little bit of that Tomlin factor of, even if you don't like some of the players, you have questions about it, you have to add just a few wins.
Yep. Because
you're underestimating how good of a coach he is.
Yeah, he's basically going to steal 2 takeaways per game with special teams decisions. Like, going for it on a 4th down or refusing to punt in a very scary situation is effectively the same as giving your team another possession. It's the same as making an interception. So those 4th down decisions are really, really important, and he is one of, if not the best at it. And then, I would rather have a great offensive play calling coach, but if you can keep on continuously getting dudes like Todd Monken, who cares? And with Lamar Jackson, the Ravens are always going to run a gimmick offense that will be effective, even if it's not creative or smart, it'll be effective because it's so different. It's kind of like playing against Georgia Tech for all those years, or Army, where sometimes they'll just beat a way better team because it's something they don't see often.
Yeah, and that's why I don't think you can really go under on the Ravens for 11.5.
I agree.
It's a big number, but I don't think you can go under because, maybe they're not a true Super Bowl contender just because of their play style, but God, they're going to win a lot of games in the regular season.
Well, the book on the Ravens has been the same for years now, and it's, if they're playing a bad team, they will win. And if they're playing an average team, they will probably win. But when they play a great team, one of those top 5 teams, fade them every time because they don't stand a chance. One of my favorite things to do is bet on the Chiefs beating the Ravens because it's always a short number because they're both considered juggernauts and one of them is not like the other.
Yeah, especially when, we've seen it how many times now, but the playoffs, when this stuff really comes out, they have the time. It's just game planning for that specific thing and your weird offense and unique defense. They become a lot more predictable.
Well, no, dude,
And
you can't use the playoff game argument against Lamar Jackson anymore because of that one time when they beat the decimated Titans because Mike Vrabel punted from the 40-yard line 3 times and ran the ball up the gut for 2 yards a carry all day.
and that shell of a New England team that Tom Brady tried to drag.
I'm done talking about the Ravens. I think it's time to wrap this division up.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So that wraps us up. I wasn't keeping track because I don't think we're betting on any of these unless you want to make Pittsburgh under official.
I'm doing Steelers under 8.5. I'm doing it.
I don't hate it because I agree with you. I don't think the roster is good enough. And when you look at Cleveland, who has a much better roster and like really isn't even that far behind on quarterback, having the same number, it is kind of crazy that they're at 8.5.
I mean, we spent about an hour today talking about how the Ravens are tough and the Bengals have so many stars and the Browns are perfect outside of quarterback. And we spent like 30 minutes saying the Steelers aren't really actually good at anything.
I mean, TJ Watt and
they got good defensive ends. They do.
Yeah, and Highsmith are both very good. And they do have some of that. Like TJ Watt is another guy where I give, like, he shows up in big moments. He has so many stupid fucking interceptions and like forced fumbles in like the last 2 drives of games. So I think he does like raise that just aura factor.
Yeah.
If you want to call it that. But yeah, still, they're an easy step below any team in their division.
Yeah. The Steelers, the Steelers aren't a better team by 2 wins than the Titans. That's for goddamn sure.
Yeah.
So I like the Steelers under a lot. I think that Justin Fields starts most of the season. That is my prediction. If you find some kind of bet where it's like, how many games does Justin Fields start? Take anything over 12 or anything under 12.5. I think he'll play more than 12 games. The Bengals and Ravens and Browns, I think will all be very good in the regular season. I just don't think that any of them really have the guns to go up against the Bills, the Chiefs, some of these juggernaut teams. Don't look now, but think about this for next week or something. Maybe think about this for 3 weeks from now. Dude, the Rams. The Rams. In the end, it all comes down to consistent big point totals from your offense. And I just don't think that these 3 teams have it because I don't think they have the quarterbacks. The entire AFC North, the whole division, the story is the same. Oh, what a roster. If only they had a different quarterback. And Lamar Jackson is the least regrettable of the quarterbacks, but even he has faults that he can't overcome, never will. Because he's just not a passer. Like, he's great at what he does. It's very fun to watch. But Lamar Jackson's never going to put up 7 touchdowns on 35 passing attempts unless his receivers do something nuts. So yeah, that's all I got out of the AFC North. It's an amazing division of football that is fatally flawed by the quarterback play.
Yeah. This is a division that's really fun for their in-division games because they have a lot of similarities and then a lot of them do like to run and they're very good in the run game on both offense and defense.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of talent outside of that. I don't know. They're always exciting games on top of being relatively close in the last year or 2.
I will end this podcast with one terrible and awful thought. Imagine how much the Browns would dominate if they still had Baker Mayfield.
This is the second time in one podcast you're doing this to me.
Well, the first time you reacted so strongly that I had to do it again. I leave you all with that thought. Until next week, when we do the NFC North, we did Alex's home division. We're doing my home division. We'll be watching football games. Grinding film? Probably not either, actually. The work is done. Go enjoy College Football 25. My Boise State Broncos will win the national championship this year. Until then, hasta.